Hi, I'm Miriam Joy and welcome to my studio. Today we're going to be doing the caroling Christmas mice. And these are a real fun project, class project that you guys have been asking for quite a while, so we decided to get them going for you today. If you've ever taken a class from me or watched any of my class videos, we do them a little bit differently. I do them a section at a time, and the reasoning behind this is I want you to stop and work on that part and have it done instead of going all the way through the whole video and say, okay, what was the next step? So I'm going to give you one step at a time, tell you to pause and do that part, and then we'll start as soon as you've completed that. Some of my supplies I want to start out with today, and everything in the drying tray are products from the Miriam Joy website. Instead of saying that over and over again, we just put them in here, just so you know that they're available at miriamjoy.com. We have our drying tray, which we do have now back in stock so that you can dry your paint on your little mice without having to set it down. Clay tools, a wood piece, and the wood piece is so you can make them a little bit sturdier if you want to just simply glue them on with the E6000, and that way they're a lot more sturdier, so you have that option as well. The quick wood, which is what we're going to be using today, and you'll really be surprised how little we really do use on this project. The E6000, I don't have a pretty tube out there today. The Miriam Joy wax design tools, we're going to be using those quite a bit with the clay today. And then I also have a hobby knife that we might need. The colors that we're going to be using today, we want a lighter and darker gray, and it doesn't matter the name of them. I have Bridgeport gray and Dizzle gray, but don't run out there and worry about that. You just want a lighter and a darker. I had clear to the hippo gray, but I thought it was a little bit too dark. That's what I have my mice in, so I've lightened them up and kind of went those two colors. So any darker and lighter gray, of course, are black and white standard colors. Any pink for the cheeks that you may want to do. This is a Valentine pink, but you also could use a rouge color if you wanted, whatever your preference is. And then I used for his scarf a Christmas green and a spring green, and you can use anything you want. On my last set I used a light and a dark blue. So whatever color you want to make the scarf, I just thought by making in these colors it'd be a little bit more Christmassy. So whatever you prefer. I'm going to be using a Sharpie, but you also could use a black paint instead of the Sharpie. Vegetable spray for our quick wood, of course our craft scissors, and our little mouse is made out of a mini bottle gourd, and whatever size you want of the mini bottle gourd is fine. I like the different sizes. Now this guy's a little bit more than I would probably like his head to be. I like him a little bit more thin, and you can even go as small as that little guy there, so there's no right or wrong. I do try to get ones that stand a little bit, but we're going to be adding feet, or you can glue it onto the wood base, so it's not a huge concern, but you don't want one that's really heavy to one side. I've also got my paper towel. I forgot this little guy here. I have my color float or my blending medium. If you need that to float with, you can also float with water if you're familiar with that. I have a little square of wax paper, and that's all you really need because we're going to kind of be turning it as we go. I've got some wire cutters if you decide to use wire for his whiskers. Some of the other things I have used is heavy fishing line, or sometimes the black strands come in your beads and it's heavier. Some of the fishing line is very thin. You want something that's thicker, so the little craft wire or something along that line for his whiskers. And I've even taken the clear and painted it black, so that's kind of what you have around the house that you can use. I have just another little clay tool. but you could use your hobby knife as well. I have an assortment of brushes that I have picked out. Something that you're comfortable base coating with. You also could float with these colors if you wanted to. I like to float with my angles. We'll get into a little bit about what floating is. I have a liner brush, probably the thin liner brush is what we'll be using today. And then I have some scruffy brushes for his fur. And I also, you could use the fluffy brushes, but I like to use fabric brushes for the cheeks, but you could use your scruffy brush as well. And that's to make the fur. I did bring out my sponges, but I don't think that it gives you a fine enough look for these. I think that the scruffy brushes give it a much better feel. And they're harder to get in the cracks and corners with. So I don't think I'll be using those, but if that's something you want to try, then feel free to do that. I do have a palette, a plate for my color, and then of course my wash basin to put my brushes into. I'm going to be using some red cardstock. You want it heavy duty. You could recycle your Christmas cards if you didn't have the red cardstock. I've also taken a piece of whatever I've had. At one time I even used a part of a cereal box and just painted it red for the songbook. So just again, don't go out and purchase something, just use what you have and whatever is available around your house. So that is most of our basic supplies. Gather up your supplies, come on back. We're going to start with molding the mouse and, we're going to start by putting some base colors on him first, and then we'll get into our quick wood. So gather your supplies and come on back. The first thing we're going to do is base coat our little mini bottle gourd, and if it has a vine on it, take it off. Sometimes you can snap them, sometimes you need to come in and cut them. Don't worry about this being perfect because we're going to put our quick wood on top of his little nose. And I like to kind of have them come pointed up, not real rounded. That way it kind of looks like it's going into the nose when I'm picking my bottle gourds. Now there's a couple of things you can do here. I put my water on this side so we're not crossing over. I'm using that darker color that we talked about, not the darkest, but the darker of the two grays, and we're going to base coat our gray. And there's a couple of things you can do. You can either base coat it with a brush, and that's not covering real well, and that's just my paint acting up right now. Or you can also put it on with a craft sponge and just put it on just like that. And what that is going to do is give it more of a furry texture, and you're probably going to need about 2 coats to cover it really, really well. And like I said, this color's not working quite right here. I probably don't have it shaken up enough all in together. And just go ahead and base coat that like that and let it dry. And then we're going to put another coat on that again, and then we'll put our lighter color on. So go ahead and base coat that with the gray. While that guy is drying, we can go ahead and start on our card. And we want to make a big enough caroling book, but not enough that it takes up the whole gourd. We want to kind of adjust it to him. And what I'm going to do is cut a piece of red cardstock. And then we're going to fold this guy in half. And don't forget, if you don't have any red cardstock, you can use something else and paint it with your red acrylic paints. So I know I've got this guy too wide, and by putting him together like this, then we can even him more out anyway, get him nice and straight. And let's take a look and see, and that's just about perfect. I might trim him just even a little bit more. It's not quite so wide. There. And you want to adjust to your mouse, because if you had a little mouse, the book may take up the whole thing. So you kind of want to think about how big your book is. And also you want to have it out enough that you can color the scarf underneath as well. So on my caroling book or song book, I'm going to make some music notes. And you could do this with your black acrylic paint, but I'm going to cheat and use a Sharpie or a permanent marker. It wouldn't matter. I'm going to make 3 little notes here and try and get these as circle as you can, and all the same size if possible. And then I'm going to go up and give them that little tail. And this guy I'm going to do 2. And this guy I'm going to do 1. So we've got our music on. You could put some little lines through it if you wanted, whatever you wanted to do. I'm going to go ahead and make a holly, and I'm going to use my kind of lime green or spring green color. And with my liner brush, we are going to put that on. And it's just out and out and out to a tail. It doesn't have to be perfect. On the one side I had 3 of the outs, and on the other side I had 2. And we're just going to bring that down. I'm going to bring this guy a little bit more. Maybe I will put that 3rd one in. There we go. And just kind of cover this nice and neat. And I am going to come in with my Sharpie and try and stay out of my paint here and add some holly berries, because that's already red. So we're just going to outline them. And we've got to let the lime green color dry before we come in and do our liner work. But now we've got this done, so we don't have to stop later on and get this all done, all except for our little line down the middle. Our songbook will be ready to go. And I tried putting these in with Sharpie on the side, and it's just not bright and colorful enough. So I went back to just adding that little bit. Really makes a difference. Okay, now you've got your little guy drying on your gourd board. If he's dry, go ahead and put a second coat of the medium gray on him, and we'll be right back. Once he's dry, we're going to use our lighter gray, and this one's a Diesel gray. And the reason that I go ahead and base coat this part now instead of later, because we've got to do some more painting later. There's so many cracks and crevices, it's really hard to get in there, that by doing it first, it's so much easier for me just to paint the quickwood parts on later. So that's kind of the reason that I do it that way. So instead of sponging, I'm going to come in here and use my scruffy brush. And see how I pull that and pounce that? You don't want to go straight from your paint to your project, or you're just going to end up with a glob. You want to pounce that out till there's no globs. And then come over to your project and then just start putting it on. That makes it more furry instead of globby. And you get that nice texture. And if we did it with the sponge, we'd be getting bigger sections instead of smaller sections like this. If you get a glob, come in and wipe it off and then put it back on, or if you needed to, you also could go back over with your base coat color if you didn't like it, and redo it till you get it where you like it. You don't have to settle. We're just going to go around his whole body. that nice fur look like a mouse. Come on up to his head. He should be dry enough down here to grab onto. Make sure you kind of get him in those crevices. I know we're going to be covering that up with his scarf, but that's okay. Okay. So get that done. That won't take long to dry. You probably go straight to your quick wood after you get him all kind of furry looking. If you needed to let that guy dry a little bit, your holly on your songbook should be dry enough that we can add a vein to him. And I added just a tad of water to that to make it consistent for liner work. Got him just a little bit too watery here. And we're just going to pull the vein down the middle and to the sides, kind of where they go in. And boy, did I get that watery. That's funny. Okay, so we've got him done, and we'll set him aside. We'll pull our little guy off our dry board, and why our dry board is so nice is because you can set it on here and it can continue to dry without affecting your paint that much. So these are really, really nice. Even when you're varnishing, you can varnish it as well. It's got these little spikes that come up underneath that kind of hold it up instead of it sitting on one layer. So that's what is so special about the dry board. All right, once we've got him dry, we're going to go ahead and start our quick wood. Now, I know a lot of you have worked with quick wood, but maybe some of you haven't. First thing you want to do when you're getting ready to work with quick wood is remove your jewelry, because quick wood dries rock hard in an hour. It's workable for 20 minutes. That's why this is the only product that I will use for my mice, is because I'm building them so fast. And if you're going to do some for Christmas, put them in a line and do them like that, because it's almost just as hard to do a whole assembly line as it is to do one. So just go ahead and get them all done while you're working on it. But quick wood is 2 parts epoxy, and there is your second part. So they're already pre-measured out for you. And all you have to do is take your scissors and cut the little part that you're using. And we don't need that much. In fact, that's kind of the hardest thing, is to cut a little bit. Now, cover the remainder back up with that little plastic tab. And you don't have to put it back in your tube right now, but when you're all done, put it back into your tube, and that keeps it nice and fresh for you. The inside, there is all of your warnings and stuff about your quick wood, so you may want to read over that and follow the instructions. When you get to this piece, there is a plastic part around it. It is really important to remove that. I can't tell you how many students I've had that can't figure out what is wrong with it because there's a piece of plastic in there. I'm going to take my vegetable spray and spray my hands so it doesn't stick. I'm also going to rub a little bit on my wax paper right there so it doesn't stick to that. And then we're going to activate our quick wood by kneading it. And that's what starts to make it hard. And I've had people that have written to me and said it never hardened, and of course they forgot to knead it really, really well. You don't want to see any marbleizing in the color, and you want it to kind of start to get warm to the touch. That is really important. And I'm trying to think about how big his feet are going to be here. I don't know if I need a little bit more or not. We will try it. So I want 2 pieces the same size. So what I do is kind of roll them in balls to see if I have about the same size. And those are going to be his feet. And what we're going to do is we're going to roll them in a ball, and then I kind of roll them to a tip, and I'm going to come over to my wax paper and I'm going to set it down, and I'm going to push it down like a teardrop. And see how big that got? It seemed so small when I was working with it a minute ago. It takes less than more. And then I'm going to kind of bring this second one in here, depending on the size of your little gourd too, and make him about the same. And you can kind of look where they are sitting to kind of get an idea. And this is going to be my stabilizer piece. And we're going to set him in there, because when the whole thing sits flat, then it's going to keep him nice and straight. And I'm actually going to use my Miriam Joy tools in here to make his feet. And we're going to bring these in to make them mouse looking. And I had to do a couple of these mice before I remembered how I was doing these little toes. And I like these so much better than the way I was trying to cut and do them. And don't try to overthink that. They kind of look like maybe a penguin feet as well. So we've got those there, and what we're going to simply do is decide what part we want to be the front. If your gourd sits a certain way, or you like one part better than the other, and we're going to take that. You want this to be right in the middle here, and those little feet hanging out towards the front. And just push it into place, and it's going to sit for you. Kind of make sure they're a little bit even. You don't want them on one side or the other. If they are, just take them off and do them again. Now once you've done your feet, try to keep it as flat as possible so we can keep on working, because sometimes that will come up a little bit when you're working and you won't realize that. So you want to keep them as flat as possible, or if you wanted to walk away for 20 minutes, you can as well. Now the more you work with the quick wood and the longer it takes it to go on to the gourd, the more likely you have of it coming off. And that's okay, because all you have to do is just simply add some E6000 to it, so don't worry about anything like that. So we're going to kind of work our way up right now. We're going to put his little scarf on, and which is really simple. Take another piece of wax paper to roll it on. One of the hardest things for me with quick wood, and I guess I should get a clay set and squish it out, is to make an even kind of, what am I trying to say, where you roll it out, a long piece rolled out. Oops, I have a little bit of plastic in there. And we're going to knead it again to activate it. You can see how it's still marbleized in color. Get that all the way out. And I should cover this guy back up. Squish it out or back in, and then put that on. Because when you do with your scissors, it kind of angles it a little bit. Okay. I was really surprised. Every time I'm cutting this, I'm trying to almost cut the smallest amount I can, trying to get the two parts. I was really surprised on doing this again how little quickwood it actually takes. So what we want to kind of do is make sure it's enough to kind of come down a little bit, and I want it a little bit longer. So what we're going to do is we're going to wrap him around. Now what we've got to think about is his arms. So we want this in between, right down where the songbook comes in, and the other one past that. so that he can put that on without getting in the way of the scarf. So once we've got that scarf kind of laid in, we're going to push it on. And just push it all the way around. Do this part first before you do this part, because I actually had some extra. When you start to squish it, it kind of comes up a little bit. So we want to get that all the way on. And you can do a wider one. This one's a little bit more narrow. In fact, I'll probably trim him off just a tad because I don't want him coming that far under the songbook. So I'm going to put that piece in there and see if I can use him in a minute. Now, you can use your hobby knife. I have a tool that I like to use, and what we're going to do is we're going to put sections or color. We're going to put dark color in these sections on his scarf. Try to evenly space them all the way around. Watch your feet, they're still drying. Just make that indentation all the way around. That kind of lifted up a little bit there, so I'm going to push it back down. And I want to make sure that I didn't bring him up too far. I want to try and keep him on the ground at all times. I kind of disobeyed that. So we're going to bring this guy around, and I'm going to bring him to the end, and then I'm going to do something different at the very end. I'm going to make fringes at the end. Now in this one, I want to start with a partial one, and again, till we get to kind of where we want to do fringes. And if that lifts up, set it back down. Okay, on the fringes, we're going to do exactly what we did, only we're going to do them close together. So we're just going to come in here and go the opposite direction and just add some fringes just like that. Again, remember, this whole project, don't make it hard. Keep it simple. If it's too hard, you're trying too hard, just go back and relax and make it fun. Don't overthink it. It's when people get into trouble. It's not really hard. It's a fun, simple project. Okay, so we've got his little scarf on, so I want you to go ahead and complete that, and then come back and we're going to start on the top part of him. The next thing I want to do is go ahead and cut my whiskers, so I have them ready to go. And I want 3 on each side, and you can adjust them for the size of your gourd too. Remember, we talked about different things you could use other than wire, like real stiff fishing line or pieces of plastic on your beading or any different things like that. But you want to make sure it's stiff enough. I've also used something different and painted it, so you do have options. Okay, so we've got those ready now. So let's go ahead and let's cut our piece. This is probably going to be for the nose and the ears. And I still have some quick wood that I had from before, and I'm going to work it back in. That'll make it last longer. Took the plastic piece off. And I fold these under into my wax paper to keep them out of the air, to keep them more pliable so they don't turn as bad as well. So, again, we've got to knead it together to activate it. We're going to do our nose before our ears, and then we'll do our hands and our tail the very last thing. Doing the clay part is the easy part for me. The hard part is painting all these little things. Okay, so we've starting to get warmer. We've all kneaded together. So I'm going to take what I think I need for my nose, and we're going to kind of roll it here. Now we're going to do something a little bit different. We're not just going to set it on, because it's going to knock off if we just set it on. what we're going to kind of come and do is bring it down. You want this on the very, very tip top, not towards one way or the other way. And you can come in with your tools and kind of push him in. To get that more rounded down there. And make sure we keep him rounded on top. And I'm going to take just a little bit of that off. Try and keep him as round as possible. Make sure you're not taking them off. And I'm trying to make it harder than it is, so I'm going to quit there. Then what we want to do is we want to blend this part into our gourd so that you cannot see where the nose starts and the clay begins. Real important. And I'm using a touch of water. You can also use your vegetable spray and just scrape that down. And it should just blend from one section to the next and not be able to tell. Alright, now once you get him all blended, we're going to put his whiskers in. And I start with the bottom whisker and do one. Watch your nose, don't let him wiggle on you. And then I go up to the top layer and I do 2 at the top. We'll show you again on this other side. I know my hand's in the way a little bit. So we're going to come back in here, we're going to do 1 on the bottom. Kind of keep them in the same area where you're poking them in. And 2 on the top. Your whiskers are what adds the character to the mouse. Try not to wiggle. That one I wiggled in those holes a little bit. You want to keep those nice and tight. If they do come out, and sometimes they do, just put a drop of E6000 right in it. And just glue them right back in. That's what I do with mine. I test them. In fact, we'll probably show you how to do that. So, okay. Alright, and you can bend your little wires and everything when they're dry. That's a nice thing about using the wires. So we've got our nose on. Now we're going to, I want you to go ahead and put the nose on, and then when you get that done, don't wait in between because we've still got the rest of this to do our ears. Okay, you've got your nose done. We're going to do our ears. Now what I'm going to do is divide again into 2 equal parts, and to me that's the easiest to tell by looking at the little balls, making sure they look kind of equal. Now the ears are really easy. Don't make them hard. I'm going to set that guy down just for a minute. What you're going to do, you roll them into a ball, flatten them out with your finger. You can either put your little finger in here, or you can come in with your Miriam Joy tool, the larger, the number 3 one, and even push that in a little bit there too. Either way, works really good. I'm just going to set my little finger in there, and once I set my finger in there, I pull it on the sides, and there is my ear. So we're going to line it up. You want it kind of sticking forward. Now make sure that you line your nose up so you're only halfway, and we're going to push this bottom part on to the gourd. So let's do that one more time. Make a circle, flatten it out, take your little finger or your tool, push a little hole in the middle of there, real simple, pull that together. Make sure they're kind of the same size, the holes are kind of the same, that you pull them together kind of the same. You don't want them so close on the inside of the ear that it's touching. You want some space between there. You can pull your ears farther apart from each other. You can put them touching, whatever you want. But again, do not make that hard. Just leave that nice and simple and put them on. So once we've got those on, we're going to come to the back. And again, we're going to smooth this out so that it just blends right into the gourd. So you cannot see where the gourd begins. The clay ends. Now, one thing to make sure of is that your ears don't fall. If they're heavy, that they kind of go towards the back. You want to keep them up nice. So they're standing up nice. So keep an eye on that. And go ahead and do your ears and come on back and we're going to start on his paws. Okay, I cut my next little piece of clay here for his arms. We want to keep his arms kind of smaller, not larger. His feet and his hands, mice are real delicate, so we want to not get them too big. Their body's the main focus. And I've got my caroling book ready to go here as well. And what I'm going to do, again, divide this into two pieces so they look similar in size. And I'm going to bring this guy over here. We're actually going to attach his little hands onto the songbook. So I kind of rolled it just a little bit. And then what we're going to do is kind of squish it a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and lay part of this, which would be his hand part, onto the book about halfway in the middle. And then we're going to make his little hand. I'm going to pull in from the sides. So we squish it on both of those little sides. And again, do not make this harder than it is. We're going to push his little fingers up. And I think I'm going to switch over to my zero tool here. And bring those in. And that's all I did, is just bring them in just like that. To make his little paws. You might want to clean it up at the bottom. Again, don't make it harder than it is. And remember, if this is your first one, each one you're going to get better with. So don't worry too much about it. Set it halfway on the book again. And I do have some vegetable spray on my wax paper. We're going to bring it to make his little wrist where his hand would join. And then we're going to bring 2 times. 1, 2. Real simple. So you have his little paws there. Okay, so we're going to take this over. And you don't want too much vegetable oil on this part that's going to stick. And if anything's going to come off, it's going to be your arms. And just E6000 them back on like we talked about. Now your book pops out. So we want to reposition that right in the front where it is folded right in the middle. Line it up with his nose and between the feet, and then kind of push the back part of his arms on. You don't want them too low. And only half of your arm is going to be attached, the other is onto your songbook. And make sure that they don't kind of slide down. And this guy needs a little bit more right there. because we want to be able to paint our scarf and everything underneath that songbook. So we want to make sure he sticks out. Don't push and lose your features. And just keep an eye on them. Make sure they're not too heavy, that they start to move a little bit on you. So once you get those in position, come on back and we'll do our tail, and that's going to be the last of our clay. Again, we're going to cut about that same part that we've cut almost for all of the things that we've done. In fact, I don't think I've done it any different for our little tail. Now the tail is the hardest part. Again, we're going to remove that plastic because you have to kind of get something to hold it into place while it dries. Kneading it till it's just right. Still have a little bit of marbleization. Okay, now we don't want to make the tail too thin, and you don't want to bring it to too much of a point because you don't want it really fragile. But we kind of want it to look like a tail. So the bottom part you want to leave a little bit chunkier so you can push it on to your gourd. And that top part, bring kind of to a point but not real sharp. So that's kind of what a mouse tail should look like. And so we're going to bring it over to our piece. You're going to want to attach it kind of where a little tail should go and line it up. Kind of put that in where his ears and everything in the middle go. And we're going to push that bottom part, maybe, onto our gourd so that we attach our tail. Now, there's all kinds of things you can do with the tail. You can curl it, you can twist it, you can bring it up and kind of curl it over. The hardest part is positioning it so that it dries that way. So you kind of have to find something to put it onto. And you don't want your tail too high or too long that it doesn't look like it belongs to your mouse. And I really like to kind of put a swirl in there. And your item that you're going to dry it on also needs to be not the perfect, it needs to be the perfect size as well. So I have something I know that works, so I'm going to grab that here. And I've worked with this guy before. And this is a piece of wire. And I've kind of let this guy twirl. You can leave him, like I said, however you want to kind of let him dry. And the nice thing about this is I can get a twist at the end of that. You don't want to push it or anything so hard that it dents your clay, but you want to leave it and let it dry. So kind of think about different items that you have around the house. Like this isn't going to stick to it as well. And then go ahead and get that tail on, and then we're going to let our mouse completely dry till it's hard before we start working on him, so that we don't mess up any parts. Now see, my ears were sagging just a little bit right there, so be aware of that. Also check your arms, make sure that the bottom's nice and flat. The bottom's going to be hard by now, so don't mess with that. If you knock it off, E6000 it back on, not a big deal. So go ahead and let that dry, and we'll come on back and we're going to start painting. Okay, once your tail is dry, because he's the last thing you put on, so he doesn't wiggle or anything, we're going to go ahead and base coat the parts that we put on with clay. We're going to leave the nose, the tail, and the feet black, and we're going to paint everything else except for the scarf. That is green. So we're going to just come in with our base coat color that we started, not the color we stippled with. We still got to go back and add our fur and just cover our base coat. Now you can see how good your clay work is, and if it all blends in together. It's okay if it doesn't a little bit, because we're going to come back in and add the fur on top, and that helps it blend in even better. But we're just going to base coat our ears and half of our nose, not the tip of his nose, and our hands in the gray. Try not to get the whiskers, and if you used wire, you can bend those forward. And get this part up to the top of his nose. It's another thing when you're putting on the ears, you might want to think about how close they are to the nose so you can make sure you have enough room to get in here and base coat that. And like I said, this is the hardest part, getting in here, because we don't want to get our songbook. We want to come around and try not to get any paint on our songbook. And I'm going to show you, I get my little liner and I get my little parts that need base coated down in here between the songbook in his hands. If you're looking at it head on, it's not too bad. It doesn't show up too much, but you can get that in there really well with that. And look at your piece from different angles when you're lifting it up and say, did I get that covered? And so you can see what you've missed. So go ahead and base coat all of the ears, the hands, and the bottom part of the nose, and this little section right here at the base. Not his feet, but his little base part. If any of that came through or shows, you want that to blend in with his body. So base coat that all with your darker gray that we used for the base coat color. And then get that all done and come back, and we're going to paint black. Once you've completed your gray, you can come back in, and if you can hold your hands off of it, you can go ahead and start your black. If not, wait for it to dry and then go ahead, and we're going to work on his feet and his tail and the tip of his nose. And you may have to go back and forth with some of these colors, and if I get it on the gray, you may have to go back in with the gray a little bit, just depending on how clean you want to keep it. And I knocked a little arm off already. That's what I was talking about. They seem to be easier to knock off. We'll just E6000 them on. And I'm going to do it after, because that kind of gives me access to a scarf. So I'm going to not glue it on till I paint it. And you could, after we get them all done, you could even test them, make sure nothing's loose. If it is, go ahead and pop it off and put your E6000 on it and put it back on. I don't know if it's the leverage of the book or because I mess with the positioning of the book so much, but the arms seem to be the ones that I have the problems with. And don't forget, like I said, turn at different angles so you can see where you're missing something. And you can also use your liner brush, which is what I probably should be doing, to get in some of these tighter areas. And I see a whole section. Now don't get the paint on it. Start spreading it around with your little pinky. And I do see some areas. I'm going to let that dry for a minute, and I'm going to come back in with my gray and try to cover that back up. And I'm going to use my liner brush and kind of come around the base of this nose, and then you can use your base coating brush, but kind of make it a nice even line where it goes all the way around. And you can also paint around those little whiskers. And that's another thing, I kind of check my whiskers, make sure if they're loose, then I pull them out, I glue a little bit of E6000 on them, and I put them back in. Okay, I'm going to finish him up in a minute, but all we're going to do is come around his tail as well. I'm going to do all of his tail and just try to get that as close as you can without getting on the gray and on the scarf. So go ahead and base coat those 3 spots. Get them all on. Sorry for knocking the camera there. I'm really bad about that. And then come on back and we're going to stipple a little bit more fur back onto him. Alright, we base coated our black ones, and I went back with my gray and kind of touched up around there. We're going to blend some color in there so it won't show up too much anyway. But we're going to go ahead and put our stippling back on the areas that we have put new paint on. And I'm going to use a smaller stippling, scruffy brush to do my kind of fur looking. And I'm going to start with my little hand right here that I didn't put back on so I don't forget him. And we're just going to add his little fur. Remember to pounce that off. That's what makes it not come out in spots. And I'm going to do him on the sides. I'm going to go ahead and do the other little hand. If his little book was on, just do the top of his little fist part. Don't worry about the other parts too much because you can't get in without getting it on the book. But try and get it in the little crevices and everything as well. And then we're going to come up here. We're going to go around his nose. Try not to get it on the black part. If you do, you can come and put some black over it. I'm going to put some in here. And then we're going to put it onto the backs and the fronts of the ears. Again, move his little whiskers out of the way. If you get paint on him, wipe it off. And move those forward and we'll straighten those out later. Okay, so we've got all of his fur now stippled wherever we hadn't put it on. And on his hand, so go ahead and do that. And then I'm just going to go ahead and do a little bit of white since we're doing this because it really kind of goes in with this. And this white is just, and you could use the light gray, that would be fine too, but I'm going to do on his little feet, just the tips of its toes. And I'm going to do just a tad little bit more just around the tops of his ears just to make those a little bit more highlighted. Go ahead and finish that. Then we're going to come back and we're going to use our pink to put on his cheeks. Alright, we're going to go ahead and use our pink. This is Valentine's pink or a carnation pink. You also could use rouge, whatever kind of color you like for cheeks. There's no right or wrong. You can use the scruffy brush that we've been using for the fur, but I like to use for my cheeks a fabric brush. Again, I'm pulling that color out, pouncing it up and down till it's really, really light. And then I'm going to give him cheeks. And you're just going to pounce those kind of in one place till you get a circle. But you can see how light I have it. I don't have it solid color. And then we want to get it right on the opposite cheek. So pounce off a lot of your color before you pounce it onto your little mouse. And then make sure your colors match. I need a little bit more color on this side. And I think that's good. I got this guy just a tad bit higher. So we'll kind of play with that. Now, I am going to do a little bit more color here because I can't pounce as easier in here. So I'm going to kind of turn my brush around and get some pink in the inside. So we get his little ears covered with pink on the inside. Alright, and that is all the pink that we do need on that. So go ahead and get that done, and we're going to start on his scarf. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and paint his scarf a lime green or a spring green, and I'm just using that brush coming up as close as I can get, trying not to get it onto the gray. You can use your liner brush to get into little fine areas a little bit better. And don't worry about filling these grooves in because we're going to come in with our darker green. Now this is a time to personalize your mice. If you're making them for somebody and they like purple or pink or blue, whatever color they may like, this is how you could personalize them and make them special for somebody. It's just by changing this color here. I just picked the colors of Christmas just for the video, so do whatever you like. I, in the original ones, had done it a light blue green to make it kind of wintry looking, and those were really, really cute too. But the bright fluorescent green kind of color gives it more Christmas feel. So just use whatever you are comfortable with. This is just going to be kind of hard getting all this in. Now if you've got your book on here, you may have to get down in here with a liner brush. Because remember, we've got one hand and our little book off right now on mine, and I just left it that way. If yours came off, just leave it and go ahead and we'll glue it on when we get pretty well done here, and it's so much easier that way than having to fight around it. So just use what is ever easiest for you. If you want to do 2 coats, you can do 2 coats. If you only want to do 1, put that darker green on, that's fine as well. So go ahead and get that base coated on, and then we're going to come in and add some darker green. Once your scarf is dried enough that you can come back in, we're going to use our Christmas green, and we're just going to come in and we're going to add our stripes on our scarf. And that's why I said don't worry about the grooves, because this is when we're kind of painting the grooves. And we're just going to do that all the way around. If you needed to put a second coat on your green, you can, until you're comfortable with it. The things that makes the mice is all the little details. That's what really makes a nice piece, is all the little details that you do. So detailing it with little stuff like this really adds to a piece. I don't think I'm going to be able to get it in that back one without getting that black. If you wanted to do it the other way on the scarf, you could do it the other way. Add one more little section to get. Okay, and then we're going to get the other direction. Now remember, if you've got that little book in front of that's going to be hard. But just do it to the best of your abilities because nobody's going to look way down in there normally. Okay, and then we've got his little scarf. Now the next thing I'm going to do is we're going to do some color blending. And this is when you take your color float or your blending solution. And I like to use an angle brush, but you can use a flat brush, it doesn't matter. There's one thing that I do different though. First thing I do is I wet it and completely dry it out if it's really dry. That way it doesn't absorb all of your solution. And then you're going to put it in your solution just a little bit, so that's in your brush. Then you're going to take your brush and you're going to dip it halfway in the paint. So the paint is only halfway in the brush. And then you're going to blend it out so that you're going from a lot of paint to no paint at all. You're going to walk it back and forth each direction. So now that we've blended it out, I'm going to come back and I'm going to go on the back side of the scarf to make that top one pop out, and underneath that as well, so that it looks like that top one is sitting on top and not back behind. So it really adds a lot to that. So go ahead and get a scarf done, and then we're going to go ahead and start blending and doing some shading on the rest of the mouse. Once we've got a scarf done, we're going ahead and do our shading on the mouse. And I'm going to use the darker gray. See how much darker that is? On these guys, I used black. So whatever you have, you can use it. You just want a darker color to help bring the mouse to life. So again, I'm going to take my brush. I'm going to get into the blending or floating solution, and I'm going to load it halfway up. And I'm going to walk it out. We'll see if this is dark enough or if we want black. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go underneath his scarf, and that looks just enough. I think black would be too much. Now, when your float starts to lose color, you have to load it again. When the color blending solution, you don't have to always go back in the water, but if you're using just water, go back into it again and reload. But make sure you don't mix up which side of the brush you're using. You want this dark part of the brush always loaded in the same. It's easy to remember when you're using an angle, but you also can use the flat brush. And you want that up against what you're working on. What this does is it separates the items and brings the top part forward and the back part back, so you can really see the definition of your mouse. Now if that part is still under your little book, just do the best you can. And we're going to go all the way around our little mouse. I do have a video on YouTube about floating. If you need a little bit more detail in that, jump over to my YouTube video and just search for floating. Sometimes I refer to it as shading or highlighting just because you're going darker or lighter. We're going to go all the way around his little tail. And back to where we started. So now we're going to flip it and we're going to do the other side of his scarf. And one thing I didn't talk about on his tail, when you're doing his tail, when you're letting it dry, make sure you don't have it really to one side or the other because it'll make your little mouse side heavy. So you want to make sure that you don't do that. That's kind of important. Now that we've done that, we're going to do under his nose to make sure that his nose looks like it's attached. So we're doing under his nose. And get in there the best you can. If you can't get in there all the way, just do the front part that people would see. And I messed with that a little bit, so I'll have to put a little bit more black paint there. But now it looks like his nose belongs. And then we're going to go ahead and do around his arm. Now we've got his other arm off, so we're going to have to figure out... Now this part's lifted, so we're just coming right about there. So we've got to figure out where this guy was attached. If you can't tell, usually you can tell right where they came off. And we're going to do him too. That way we'll know right where he had put him back on at. So we've got him. And I'm going to put just a crease in his ears, just for fun. You don't have to do that. Make his ears look a little bit different. But see how good we did blending? You can hardly tell where his nose begins and the gourd ends. So that's really, really good. If you wanted to, you could, and I don't know if you can get in there or not, you could also put one kind of above the feet, and you could even kind of follow that part around there as well. So we've got him all done. So go ahead and finish that part up, and then we're going to apply some black paint for details. We're going to go ahead and work on his mouth, and then we'll add some other details with the black. Now with the mouse, you can use a flat or the angle. I just am so used to the angle. But what we want to do is try to think about right where the center of him is, and to put an oval for his mouth, if you kind of bring your brush up and around to do it that way, flip him over and do it again, then you kind of have the basic shape, and then we can start to fill him in a little bit and make him a little bit better. Got a little bit of green right there by his mouth. We might see if we can just cover that up. But if you do it that way, a lot of times you'll end up with your oval a lot easier than having to stop and try to figure out where it is. And the size of your oval, again, depends on your mouse, size of your gourd. Smaller one, you're going to need a smaller one. The bigger one, you're going to need a bigger one. It doesn't have to be perfect. I've got this guy just a tad over to the side here. See if I can just bring him out just a little bit. And you may want to do just a second coat if he needs it, or just fill him in a little bit. And there is his mouth. And then we're going to take our liner. We're going to add just a couple of details. I've added just a little bit of water to my black paint. And we're going to bring it in his paws a little bit. So we're going to do it to these little paws. Okay, and then we're also going to do his little eyes. Now, I didn't leave much room for his eyes here. So, there we go. Let's get this in just a little bit bigger to match the other side. Okay, so we've got his little eyes there. They're kind of shut because he's kind of singing. And we're going to add his teeth. But first I'm going to put that little reflective light on his nose. I'm going to water my paint down just a little bit, and I don't want it very big, and I want to pull it from the bottom to the top, kind of in a comma stroke. There we go. Now his teeth, I'm going to load up with a lot of paint. I'm going to kind of set my brush down, which is called a pudmuckle, and do it again. There we go. And you could make the bottoms a little bit flatter if you wanted to, or however you wanted to do that. And I think we are basically done with our little singing mouse here. I'm going to kind of take a look and make sure I have everything on him. There's one other spot I might like to float, and just because this guy is so much lighter, and I like the lighter mouse so much better than the darker ones, but you can do them in different colors, have, you know, different things for different people. That's okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to darken up his ears just a little bit. I'm going to float around that just a tad to darken that up. All right. Okay, now we're going to E6000 this guy, and I was really surprised. I've never had him come off the paper before. Usually that'll just come down. So we're going to put that on in our little bit of E6000 on both sides of his hand. And glue that guy back on. So we're going to get under that guy and back on that one. And I'm going to remove some of this glue that came through. And just make sure that you have it and it doesn't slide, and glue that back into place. Isn't he really, really cute? So I'm going to come back, check, make sure we got everything, and then I'm going to talk you through how we finish him up. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and straighten his whiskers out because we've got him all done. You could make him kind of funny shaping or whatever you want to do to match your little mouse and his little character. Also, another thing that you can do, if you have somebody that you're giving it to and you want to personalize it, you can personalize it by putting their name on the songbook as well. Once he's completely done and dry, I'm going to spray varnish him completely, including the little songbook. It doesn't hurt them at all. If you wanted to brush it on, you could brush it on. That's just, you're going to have a lot more crevices to try and get into. That's going to be a lot harder. Remember, you can put them on a little bit, the stands to make them a little bit more durable, and you could put different thing around to make them snow if you wanted to as well. But you see, we didn't use a lot of the quick wood, and just a reminder that we do carry the quick wood because it is a harder product to find, and for the mouse it is the perfect clay because you're working so fast with that. So please visit us at miriamjoy.com for the products and some of the other products like the clay tools and the Miriam Joy tools, the dry board, the wood slice, to name a few. If you have any questions about the project that we did, please email me at art@miriamjoy.com. Don't forget to come over and check us out on Facebook. We are always running specials or doing fun things, especially at Christmas time. We usually have a big contest going on. This year we have one for $250, which has some great products in it as well. So jump on over there to Miriam Joy Gourd Creations. Check out all the different YouTube videos. We currently have 250 YouTube videos. A lot of them I work with the different quick wood projects. So run over there, bring up quick wood and see the different things we have there for you as well. So thank you so much for joining me for this fun caroling Christmas mouse. I hope you find him as whimsical and fun, and that he adds just a little bit of character to your Christmas.